John Duns, commonly called Duns Scotus, is generally considered to be one of the three most important philosopher-theologians of the High Middle Ages. Scotus has had considerable influence on both Catholic and secular thought. The doctrines for which he is best known are the univocity of being, that existence is the most abstract concept we have, applicable to everything that exists, the formal distinction, a way of distinguishing between different aspects of the same thing, and the idea of hecaeity, the property supposed to be in each individual thing that makes it an individual. Scotus also developed a complex argument for the existence of God, and argued for the Immaculate Conception of Mary. Duns Scotus was given the medieval accolade Doctor Subtilis for his penetrating and subtle manner of thought. He was beatified by Pope John Paul II in 1993. Life. Little is known of Duns Scotus apart from his work. His date of birth is thought to have been between the 23rd of December 1265 and the 17th of March 1266. Born into a leading family of the region. The site of his birth, in front of the Pavilion Lodge, near the North Lodge of Duns Castle, is now marked by a cairn which was erected in 1966 by the Franciscan Friars of the United Kingdom to mark the 700th anniversary of his birth. Duns Scotus received the religious habit of the Friars Minor at Dumfries, where his uncle, Elias Duns, was guardian. Duns Scotus' age is based on the first certain date for his life, that of his ordination to the Catholic priesthood at the Church of St Andrew in Northampton, England, on the 17th of March 1291. The minimum canonical age for ordination to the Catholic priesthood is 25, and it is generally assumed that he would have been ordained as soon as it was permitted. That his contemporaries called him Johannes Duns, after the medieval practice of calling people by their Christian name followed by their place of origin, suggests that he came from Duns, in Berwickshire, Scotland. According to tradition, Duns Scotus was educated at the Franciscan Studium at Oxford, a house behind St Ebbe's Church, in a triangular area enclosed by Pennyfarthing Street and running from St Aldgates to the castle, the Bailey and the Old Wall, where the Friars Minor had moved when the University of Paris was dispersed in 1229–30. At that time there would have been about 270 persons living there, of whom about 80 would have been friars. Duns Scotus appears to have been in Oxford by 1300, as he is listed among a group of friars for whom the minister provincial of the English province requested faculties from the Bishop of Lincoln for the hearing of confessions. He took part in a disputation under the Regent Master, Philip of Bridlington. He began lecturing on Peter Lombard's sentences at the prestigious University of Paris towards the end of 1302. Later in that academic year, however, he was expelled from the University of Paris for siding with Pope Boniface VIII in his feud with King Philip IV of France over the taxation of church property. Duns Scotus was back in Paris before the end of 1304, probably returning in May. He continued lecturing there until, for reasons that are still mysterious, he was dispatched to the Franciscan Studium at Cologne, probably in October 1307. According to the 15th-century writer William Vory Long, his departure was sudden and unexpected. He was relaxing or talking with students in the Prato Clericorum or Prio Clerks, an open area of the left bank used by scholars for recreation. When orders arrived from the Franciscan Minister General, Scotus left immediately, taking few or no personal belongings. Duns Scotus died unexpectedly in Cologne in November 1308. The date of his death is traditionally given as the 8th of November. He is buried in the Church of the Friars Minor there. His sarcophagus bears the Latin inscription, Scotia me genuit, Anglia me secepit, Gallia me docuit, Colonia me tenet. The story about Duns Scotus being buried alive, in the absence of his servant who alone knew of his susceptibility to coma, is probably a myth. It was reported by Sir Francis Bacon in his Historia Vitae Mortis, The colophon of Codex 66 of Merton College, Oxford says that Scotus was also at Cambridge, but we do not know for certain if this is true, or if it was when he was there. Work. Scotus' a great work is his commentary on the sentences of Peter Lombard, which contains nearly all the philosophical views and arguments for which he is well known, including their univocity of being, the formal distinction, less than numerical unity, individual nature or thisness, his critique of illuminationism and his renowned argument for the existence of God. His commentary exists in several versions. The standard version is the Ordinatio, a revised version of lectures he gave as a bachelor at Oxford. The initial revision was probably begun in the summer of 1300. See the remarks in the prologue. Question 2. Alluding to the Third Battle of Homs in 1299, news of which probably reached Oxford in the summer of 1300. It was still incomplete when Scotus left for Paris in 1302. The original lectures were also transcribed and recently published as The Lecturer. The two other versions of the work are Scotus and Notes for the Oxford Lectures, recently published as The Lecturer, the first book of which was probably written in Oxford in the late 1290s, and the Reportatio Parisiensis, consisting of transcriptions of the lectures on the sentences given by Scotus when he was in Paris. A reportatio is a student report or transcription of the original lecture of a master. A version that has been checked by the master himself is known as a reportatio examinata. By the time of Scotus, these commentaries on the sentences were no longer literal commentaries. Instead, Peter Lombard's original text was used as a starting point for highly original discussions on topics of theological or philosophical interest. For example, Book 2 Distinction 2, about the location of angels, is a starting point for a complex discussion about continuous motion, and whether the same thing can be in two different places at the same time. In the same book, Distinction 3, he uses the question of how angels can be different from one another, given that they have no material bodies, to investigate the difficult question of individuation in general. Scotus wrote purely philosophical and logical works at an early stage of his career, consisting of commentaries on Aristotle's Organon. These are the questions on Porphyry's Isagogia and Aristotle's categories, Peri, Hermeneias, and De Sophisticis Elenchis, probably dating to around 1295. His commentary on Aristotle's metaphysics was probably written in stages, the first version having started around 1297, with significant additions and amendments possibly after the completion of the main body of the Ordinatio. His exposition on the metaphysics was lost for centuries but was recently rediscovered and edited by Giorgio Pini. In addition, there are 46 short disputations called Collationis, probably dating from 1300 to 1305, a work in natural theology, and his Quaestiones Quodlibetales, probably dating to Advent 1306 or Lent 1307. A number of works once believed to have been written by Scotus are now known to have been misattributed. There were already concerns about this within 2 centuries of his death, when the 16th-century logician Jacobus Navarros noted inconsistencies between these texts and his commentary on the sentences, leading him to doubt whether he had written any logical works at all. The questions on the prior analytics were also discovered to be mistakenly attributed. In 1922, Grabman showed that the logical work De Modis Significandi was actually by Thomas of Erfurt, a 14th-century logician of the modist school. Thus the claim that Martin Heidegger wrote his habilitation Schrift on Scotus is only half true, as the second part is actually based on the work by Erfurt. Metaphysics. Realism. Scotus is generally considered to be a realist in that he treated universals as real. He attacks a position close to that later defended by Occam, arguing that things have a common nature, for example the humanity common to Socrates, Plato, and Plutarch. Univocity of being. He followed Aristotle in asserting that the subject matter of metaphysics is being qua being. Being in general, as a univocal notion, was for him the first object of the intellect. Metaphysics includes the study of the transcendentals, so called because they transcend the division of being into finite and infinite and the further division of finite being into the 10 Aristotelian categories. Being itself is a transcendental, and so are the attributes of being, one, true, and good, which are coextensive with being, but which each add something to it. The doctrine of the univocity of being implies the denial of any real distinction between essence and existence. Aquinas had argued that in all finite being, the essence of a thing is distinct from its existence. Scotus rejected the distinction. Scotus argued that we cannot conceive of what it is to be something, without conceiving it as existing. We should not make any distinction between whether a thing exists and what it is, for we never know whether something exists, unless we have some concept of what we know to exist. Individuation. Scotus elaborates a distinct view on hylomorphism, with three important strong theses that differentiate him. He held, 1. That there exists matter that has no form whatsoever, or prime matter, as the stuff underlying all change, against Aquinas. 2. That not all created substances are composites of form and matter, that is, that purely spiritual substances do exist. And 3. That one and the same substance can have more than one substantial form. For instance, humans have at least two substantial forms, the soul and the form of the body. He argued for an original principle of individuation, the hecaity, as the ultimate unity of a unique individual, as opposed to the common nature feature existing in any number of individuals. For Scotus, the axiom stating that only the individual exists is a dominating principle of the understanding of reality. For the apprehension of individuals, an intuitive cognition is required, which gives us the present existence or the non-existence of an individual, as opposed to abstract cognition. Thus the human soul, in its separated state from the body, will be capable of knowing the spiritual intuitively. Formal distinction. Like other realist philosophers of the period, Scotus recognized the need for an intermediate distinction that was not merely conceptual, but not fully real or mind-dependent either. Scotus argued for a formal distinction, which holds between entities which are inseparable and indistinct in reality, but whose definitions are not identical. For example, the personal properties of the Trinity are formally distinct from the divine essence. Similarly, the distinction between the thisness or hecaity of a thing is intermediate between a real and a conceptual distinction. There is also a formal distinction between the divine attributes and the powers of the soul.